Overnight, 4 people killed in an amusement park accident when a raft overturned on the Thunder River Rapids ride in Australia.
The infamous River Rapids disaster. When 42-year-old Cindy Lowe, 34-year-old Kate Goodchild, her brother Luke Dorsett, and his partner Roozi Araghi went to Dreamworld on the 25th of October 2016, they had no idea that they would not be leaving alive. It was supposed to be a day to remember, a day to let loose with family and friends, have a few drinks, eat some nice food, and have fun on some thrilling rides. They were supposed to enjoy their day and leave with full tummies and smiles on their faces. But what was supposed to be just another day at the park quickly turned into a terrifying nightmare that shook not only them, but the rest of Australia as well. What happened that day? How did a fun day in the sun turn into a tragic nightmare? And how did corporate greed and negligence play a part in the deaths of these 4 innocent people? This is the tragic tale of the River Rapids disaster, which took the lives of unsuspecting victims and left their families overturned with grief. Cindy Lowe and her family, as well as Kate Goodchild, her brother, and his partner, all went to Dreamworld that day, hoping to get on the Thunder Rapids ride. Of course they wanted to get on the Thunder Rapids ride, seeing as it was one of the most popular features in the park. From its opening in December 1986 until its closure, the themed Town of Gold Rush Watercourse ride was one of the biggest and most frequented attractions at Dreamworld. It was fast-paced and designed to simulate the rush of whitewater rafting, coupled with the feel of being in an adventure movie. The fun part of this ride was that, much like whitewater rafting, the boats would jostle, dip, and move unpredictably through the water channel, which kept the riders on the edge of their seats. Now, of course, some people would surely get wetter than others, but it was still entertaining for those who were relatively dry to laugh at those who got drenched in the water. Dreamworld is a zoo and theme park on the Gold Coast in the Australian state of Queensland. It attracts about 1 million people per year and has over 40 rides and attractions, making it the largest theme park in Australia. Dreamworld, like every other theme park, is divided into sections with different themes. Attractions like DreamWorks Experience, Ocean Parade, and Gold Rush Country were all inspired by the Australian gold rushes of the 1800s. Given its massive success, you would think that the people in charge of it would do a better job of making sure people were safe. Since its opening in 1981, visitors trusted the rides, the staff, and everyone else in charge of their safety, and by 2016, the park had been operating for 35 years without any hassle or serious scandal. But all this changed in late October when one of the pumps on the Thunder Rapids ride broke down, causing an unforeseen incident that would inevitably lead to its downfall. The design of the ride was simple enough. The rapids were simulated by attaching logs to the base of a river channel and using several circular rafts that could carry up to 6 riders each. Once dispatched, each raft would go through a waterway, first past the area where people were waiting and then into a cave. After the cave was the main rapids section of the ride. The ride was downhill, which made raft movement easy and eliminated the need for an onboard propulsion mechanism. This meant that at the end of the journey, the rafts would need to be lifted back up to the queuing area where patrons would board, and the process would begin itself again. Understandably, the park built a conveyor belt that took the raft up on wooden slats back to the station with the guests still on board. But the rafts weren't the only thing that needed to be lifted back up to begin the circuit. The Thunder River Rapids ride water didn't come from a natural source, so it too needed to complete the same rotation as the rafts, and this was achieved using 2 large water pumps. On that fateful day, one of those 2 pumps failed, leading to one of the most ghastly theme park accidents Australia has known. One of the 2 pumps failing meant that the water level was much lower than was essential to the optimal operation of the ride. Usually, it was the high water level and downward motion of the ride that helped propel the rafts to the conveyor belt and safely back up. But the low water level left them stranded on support rails near the end of the conveyor belt. Unable to reach the loading area, the 6 passengers were forced to wait, hoping ride staff would come to their aid. With a raft stuck on the conveyor belt, it was only logical for the ride to be shut down, the rotation cut off, and for help to be quickly sent to those stranded. However, the conveyor belt kept moving, carrying another raft down the circuit. In the second raft were 34-year-old Kate Goodchild and her 12-year-old daughter. She'd come to Dreamworld that day with her family, including her brother Luke Dorsett and his partner Roozi Araghi. Dorsett and Araghi were in the raft with them. Also in the raft were 42-year-old Cindy Lowe, a mother from Sydney, and her 10-year-old son Kieran. She'd come with her husband and kids and was so excited to get on the ride that she made the fatal mistake of separating from her husband and daughter and getting on a separate raft with 4 strangers. Tragedy struck when, only about a minute after the first raft got stuck, The second raft that carried the victims violently collided with the first one, causing both rafts to pivot upwards. The first raft fell back into its original horizontal position and rested on the support rails again, but the still-moving conveyor belt only pushed the second raft further into a vertical position. Kate Goodchild, Luke Dorsett, Roozi Araghi, and Cindy Lowe all fell out of the raft and onto the conveyor belt. At this point, the conveyor mechanism was still moving, and the victims were either moved under the raft, their bodies crushed and disfigured by the motion, or they fell through the gaps in the conveyor belt and got trapped in the machinery beneath, causing fatal compression injuries. Unfortunately, the two kids who were also on the raft witnessed their mothers fall out of it and drown before their very eyes. Luckily, when the raft went vertical again, the children managed to cling to it, and, even after witnessing this horrific event, they were able to bravely climb out of the raft and get onto nearby platforms once the conveyor had been shut down by ride staff. Park operators finally stopped the ride. It was evacuated, and the park was closed as efforts began to recover the victims and those left stranded. The river was drained, and over 7 paramedic crews responded to emergency calls. Firefighters and police were also present on the scene, but even with the river drained, the recovery of the bodies lasted until the early hours of the next morning. The victims' bodies were so badly disfigured that the process of retrieving them traumatized some paramedics so much that they required counseling. The ride was shut down indefinitely that day, but at that time, Ardent Leisure, Dreamworld's parent company, still had plans to reopen. That was until the 9th of November, when the chief executive, Deborah Thomas, announced that the ride would be permanently closed out of respect for the victims and their families. However, the investigation that took place during that 1-month temporary closure revealed a variety of errors on the part of the park when it was finally concluded. So, what exactly went wrong with the Thunder River Rapids ride? Since its opening in 1986, it has operated as intended. What happened on that day in 2016 that prevented the operators from switching off the ride when one pump failed? And what caused the failure of the pump in the first place? According to James McDougall, the Queensland coroner, Dreamworld might have been a modern, world-class theme park, but its safety and maintenance systems were subpar. The most basic safety features had not been installed on the ride, even though they were cheap. It lacked an automatic water level indicator. A thorough risk assessment had not been conducted on the ride by professionals, and that task was left to the ride staff, who were in no way qualified for the job. To make matters worse, maintenance staff didn't know where the emergency stop button for the ride was in the main control room, and they had never tested it. This is probably why it took so long to shut it down. Improvements to the ride's safety features were also pushed forward because Ardent Leisure was worried about the budget. The ride was unsafe, and records of the ride's maintenance were rudimentary at best. In 2018, the remaining structures of what was once Thunder River Rapids ride were demolished. In August of the following year, Dreamworld announced that a new roller coaster, Steel Taipan, would be built on Thunder River's lot in 2021. If only those in charge had considered these things or even looked into the fact that the ride had failed twice on the same day that the 4 victims were lost to the world, maybe this story would have ended on a happier note. Unfortunately, it doesn't. In 2020, 3 charges were laid against Ardent Leisure. On the 28th of July, a week before the scheduled trial, Ardent Leisure pleaded guilty to their negligence and was fined $3.6 million for the breach of the Brisbane Work Health and Safety Act. No fine could, however, bring back the 4 lives that were violently ended that day. Kate Goodchild, Luke Dorsett, Roozi Araghi, and Cindy Lowe all came for a fun day at a theme park. It was a day for them to spend time with family and friends, let loose, eat food, and enjoy the thrills and attractions. They came in happy and unsuspecting, only to have their lives cut short due to the mistakes of people they had trusted with their safety. The thrill of amusement park rides can be wonderful, but sometimes not all happy days end on a happy note.